Next up, we have Trish Carolan. Trish is a BCBA who's worked in the special education system in Ireland for the past 20 years. She's a school leader in a special school serving autistic students with co-occurring intellectual disabilities and other complex needs. Trish has also worked as a teacher, educator, providing professional learning and in-school support with the NCSE. The research she is about to speak about was completed as part of her doctoral studies in education at the Dublin City University.
Green.
Hi, Trish.
Oh, hi, everybody. Can you see or hear me?
I can see you now.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to try and get my slides up. And hopefully that will happen. Okay. And can you see my slides or my note slides?
I can see your note slides.
Okay. I'm going to just swap that then. What about now?
That's fantastic.
Great. Okay, thank you. I will have to kind of flag that because it's only picking up my notes, my main slides on my laptop, I have to look over here, which might be a bit strange for people, but we'll make it work. So thanks so much to everyone for coming along to listen today. I'm really thrilled to be asked to be here to chat about this research, which I'm in the process of writing up for submission for my doctorate. It's an education doctorate in DCU. And a huge thanks are owed to my supervisors, Sinead and Laura, who have actually gotten me this far with great patience and encouragement. I want to thank Laura and Alan as well and the ISBA for inviting me to this community day, which from what I've seen so far has already been a great success. So I suppose this research, it focused on imparting role-specific skills to school staff.
Okay, everybody. Next up, we have Trish Carolan. Trish is a BCBA who's worked in the special education system in Ireland for the past 20 years. She's a school leader in a special school serving autistic students with co-occurring intellectual disabilities and other complex needs. Trish has also worked as a teacher, educator, providing professional learning and in-school support with the NCSE. The research she's about to speak about was completed as part of her doctoral studies in education at the Dublin City University.
Green.
Hi, Trish.
Oh, hi, everybody. Can you see or hear me?
I can see you now.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to try and get my slides up. And hopefully that will happen. Okay. And can you see my slides or my note slides?
I can see your note slides.
Okay. I'm going to just swap that then. What about now?
That's fantastic.
Great. Okay, thank you. I will have to kind of flag that because it's only picking up my notes, my main slides on my laptop, I have to look over here, which might be a bit strange for people, but we'll make it work. So thanks so much to everyone for coming along to listen today. I'm really thrilled to be asked to be here to chat about this research, which I'm in the process of writing up for submission for my doctorate. It's an education doctorate in DCU. And a huge thanks are owed to my supervisors, Sinead and Laura, who have actually gotten me this far with great patience and encouragement. I want to thank Laura and Alan as well and the ISBA for inviting me to this community day, which from what I've seen so far has already been a great success. So I suppose this research, it focused on imparting role-specific skills to school staff, working with students with really high support needs in a special school context. This was done by first designing a bespoke behaviour support curriculum to use in the training. And I will talk about that later. And many of you might work in different contexts, and that content of the curriculum that I've designed for this research, it might not be immediately relevant, but please keep in mind that that piece, the content piece, is very adaptable. But what I was really interested in was exploring this highly practical approach to staff training, its effectiveness in increasing skills, and its impact in the classroom. But most importantly, I really wanted to know about the staff's experiences during it, both during attending this training and also afterwards trying to implement the skills in their classrooms. So quickly, just to tell you the outline of the presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background to the study, the kind of rationale behind it, talk about this bespoke behaviour support curriculum that I designed, and then we'll get to the methodology, which comes in two parts. So an intervention and later a second phase, which looked at the implementation. And then we'll talk about the findings, some conclusions and some thoughts, many thoughts, and hopefully some time for questions. Okay. Okay, so firstly, we'll just start with the setting. So this is a newly established special school. It was just established 4 months at the time that we started this research. So that really has to be taken into account when you think about what it was we were trying to achieve with the curriculum. All of the students attending had a moderate to severe profound intellectual disability. They were autistic, and many had co-occurring mental health needs. Quite a stark figure is that 44% had been out of school for 1 year or more before they enrolled in this school. At the time of the study, 18 students were enrolled. It was a huge time of transition in the school. Many weren't on full days. They were taking time, obviously, to reintegrate into the education system. Their average age was between 11 and 15 years. And I wanted to give you the student population information to kind of give a context and a better understanding to the needs of the school. But it's really important to remember that they were not the participants of my study, and these were actually the school staff. So there were 17 participants in total, 5 teachers and 12 SNAs. So a little bit about this behaviour support curriculum that I designed. I suppose I want to talk a little bit of the rationale about it. We know that there is the presence of restrictive practices in our schools. There have been multiple reports going back as far as 2018 that have highlighted that there is an over-reliance on restrictive practices in our schools when we are talking about behaviours of concern. Things like seclusion, restraint, and reduced timetables. I suppose the springboard nearly for my research was the Inclusion Ireland report in 2018. I attended that launch, and it was a really kind of deflating afternoon, quite an upsetting launch of a report that made me realise that there was much more widespread seclusion and restraint in our schools than I might have realised. And I knew we could do better, and that there were skill sets that staff needed to be able to support students with these complex behaviours of concerns that weren't present. And I knew that positive behaviour support provided a framework through which we could upskill staff working with our most vulnerable children in schools. I know that positive behaviour support provides protective factors against the use of seclusion and restraint, but it was trying to find a way to bring that into our schools. The second, I suppose, rationale behind the research was my experience delivering instruction-only CPD to teachers. So I worked for 5 years at the National Council for Special Education as an associate, where I would go and deliver behaviour support-based seminars to teachers all around the country. And this was a great opportunity for me, and there was great people working in that organisation. But what I found was that the impact of that CPD on classroom practice was quite low. So many of the teachers who would attend this training would also then apply for school visits at the end of these seminars. And I would go and see them, and found that there was really minimal impact on what was happening in the classrooms based on what we were doing in those seminars. So I suppose one of the other big reasons that I wanted to design something like this was because the frustration I felt on behalf of special needs assistants when I was delivering this CPD, because they were excluded from it. And if you can imagine a special school, sometimes up to 80% of the staff are SNAs, but only the teaching staff are receiving this really vital CPD. Excuse me. So time and again during my time in the NCSE, teachers would say that they really wished that their support staff were there to listen to the ideas, and they knew they wanted to design something that they could use in their classrooms, but they were finding it really difficult to impart that new knowledge to a team, I suppose, back in the classrooms. Okay, so again, just a little bit about the content. Every strand of the curriculum I designed for this research is recommended in the Autism Good Practice Guidelines for Schools. At the 2022 document, they are all in there. They are also featured in the National Council of Special Education 2015 research report on evidence-based practice for autism. And then in Steinbrenner's 2021, which was done for the National Clearinghouse report on autism evidence and practice. So there's an amalgamation, I suppose, of evidence-based practices for this population that are also featured in many reports, both Irish and international, that are now going to feature in this curriculum that I'm going to show you. And the other big piece that I wanted to do with this curriculum was to focus on access to human rights, really looking at choices, communication, all the things, the dignity and autonomy that we need to ensure that children who have maybe non-speaking children, we need to give them access to getting their human rights met. And that was another core rationale behind it. Okay, So also I had aims for this curriculum. I really wanted to empower staff. That was what it was about. If we could empower staff to enable their students to communicate their will and preference, then we could foster a better culture, I suppose, of respect and inclusion in our classrooms. And I really wanted to focus on the proactive teaching of coping skills. But this would have to be done, and I'll get into this more later, in a slow and considered way, really ensuring that the assent is built in along the way as well. And the curriculum, I hope, aligns with the principles of the UN CRPD, and the goals were designed to enhance autonomy. So the choice and functional communication goals were really there to enhance that autonomy. And then dignity, by reducing the reliance on restrictive practices, we are therefore increasing the dignity of our students. So getting into this curriculum that I designed, there was 3 strands with 3 units per strand, and each unit is a teachable skill, okay? So if you look first at the red strand there, that's choice making. We had preference assessments, and within that unit, there was a focus on how to pair and build relationships in the process, and then how to use the correct and consistent use of visual supports to support transition and choice. So those 3 units in choice making are really built around choice, preferences, and how to use those consistently in the classroom. The second strand was functional communication, which was really focusing on assertiveness and will and preference support. So giving children a voice, how to negotiate, how to have more autonomy, how to request needed breaks, and how to say no, which is something we take for granted sometimes, that we think children can do, but not always can. And then this last strand, which I'll delve into a bit more, is called tolerance to uncertainty. So this strand was designed to teach coping and resilience in the response to common school-based stressors by adapting environments, by using visual supports, and by, really importantly, and I'll get into this more, organizing opportunities to learn this skill. So I think we can often have really good intentions in schools, but we maybe aren't creating the same opportunities to learn things like how to wait and how to cope when things are debatable in the same way we might like structure a literacy or numeracy lesson. And what I tried to really get into with this training was that we have to approach these skills in the same way we do other curriculum goals. Okay, so I think I'll just delve into intolerance of uncertainty a little bit more, because it might be a term that some are unfamiliar a bit with, and I wanted to kind of give more rationale for the inclusion of this strand. 50% of autistic children we know experience significant co-occurring anxiety, and this is possibly much higher with the high support needs autistic children that attended this school. Intolerance of uncertainty is an important aspect of anxiety, and we need to understand it, and it often leads to this flight or fight response when activated. It involves a tendency to react negatively on an emotional and behavioural level to uncertainty and to uncertain situations and events. And the autistic community themselves have identified intolerance of uncertainty as a significant source of difficulty and distress, and have marked it as a priority area for intervention. So this is just a quick slide. I'm not going to read it all, but I just want to show you the curriculum again, but also in just kind of demonstrating which evidence-based practices were amalgamated into it. So the choice strand had antecedent-based interventions, behaviour momentum, AAC, reinforcement and visual supports embedded within it. The functional communication strand was an amalgamation of AAC, functional behaviour assessment, functional communication training, prompting, reinforcement and visual supports. And then the last, tolerance of uncertainty, used antecedent-based interventions, AAC, prompting and visual supports. So lots of amalgamation there going on. And there were 2 other evidence-based practices used in my research, but not directly in the curriculum. And these were the use of task analysis and video modelling, but I used these as part of the training package. There's loads more information on those in that Steinbrenner 21 paper. It's really worth a listen or read, pardon me. Okay, so my research questions. Will a behaviour support training package which uses BST increase skills in targeted areas of PBS among staff in special schools? So that was the intervention, that was the training piece. Did the participating staff consider it an acceptable form of professional learning? Was the behaviour support curriculum later included in students' education plans, and what factors influenced that inclusion or implementation? So there were the 4 questions, and the design that we came up with to try and answer these was a 2-phase design. So in phase 1, like I say, we had an intervention. So these were the BST workshops. The data collection tools here were mastery assessments, which are very like task analyses. I'll explain those to you as we go on. And then the outcome measures I was looking for there was skill change. So looking at the staff, SNAs and teachers, what was their baseline of the skill, and then how quickly did they acquire it. And we used a trials to criterion measure, which really just means how many times did they have to rehearse the skill before they mastered it. And then right at the end of the 6 workshops for the intervention, we did an anonymous acceptability survey, and that was Likert scaled responses, which we'll get into. 6 to 8 weeks later, returned to the school, and we looked at the teacher planning. So that was our review to see what implementation looked like. So we gathered information from fortnightly plans, from behavior support plans if they existed, from IEPs, and we looked at the frequency of curriculum unit implementation. We'll get back to how that worked. And then the last piece of the implementation check was the semi-structured interviews. So these were qualitative feedback from staff who participated in the training, where we were looking for themes and what the barriers and facilitators were. Okay, so starting with this intervention procedure, what did it look like? There were 6 90-minute workshops. In each workshop, we covered 1 to 2 of the curriculum units, and there was 1 trainer per 4 participants. All of the trainers who were in the room with me, so I was the, I suppose, instructor at the top of the room, and then we had 4 trainers. They were all also working as teachers and SNAs in other settings, but they were also qualified behaviour analysts. So that's important to note. And we felt that that was a really good mix, that we were training people who we did the same job as, but obviously the trainers also had additional qualifications. We had train the trainer sessions every week prior to doing the workshops in the setting. Initially, I'd planned to do one big super trainer session that I thought would cover everything, and I really quickly realized that wasn't going to work because it was just too much for the trainers to remember. So instead, they very kindly agreed to meet with me. We did the workshops in the setting on a Monday, but we met in another setting on a Thursday and went through what we were to do at the next workshop. And that worked out quite well. So all of the trainers, I suppose, to note, they're behaviour analysts, meaning that they're educated to master's level. And the workshops followed a coaching format using behavioural skills training, which we will explain now. So what is this BST? It is a competency-based training model. So competency meaning that we are going to practice until we reach a certain proficiency with the skill. We're going to keep going until we master it. It's 4-stepped. It works on instruction, then modelling, minimal instruction, then modelling of the skill, then rehearsing the skill, and that rehearsal happens simultaneously with feedback from trainers who are proficient in that skill. There are opportunities for the learner to practice the skill and understand the areas that need improvement. And this has been used successfully in a variety of professional contexts and for a variety of skills. And it suits skills that can be simulated in a role play context, but it did not or had not been explored in an Irish education context. The kind of places that it's been used a lot within the medical professionals, actually medical students, dental hygienists, phlebotomists, speech therapists, social care staff, anywhere, I suppose, where you want to chain together a complex skill and where the consistency is key. So things like blood taking, obviously, you see it a lot there. Lumbar punctures, dental hygienists, and how to do correct cleans, things that have step-by-steps in their skills but need to be performed with a level of competency. That's where you see a lot of the research within staff training. But how did it look in my workshops? So slightly different. And just to note, like in the BST research, this is not always set in stone. The 4 components need to be there, but sometimes there's a little bit of a change in how it's particularly presented. So I'm going to describe how it looked for me. So we designed a PowerPoint instruction of when, why, and how you would teach each skill. This was really short. I'll show you one in a minute because I can do that. They were really about 12 slides. It took no more than 15 minutes to do. We talked about the steps required to teach each skill then the steps required to teach each skill were described in a step-by-step task analysis or mastery assessment. And a video model was created to accompany each curriculum unit. So videos were created in my own place of work during real teaching scenarios. There was also a resource pack. These were the visual supports and different materials and resources that a teacher or SNA would need to complete the skill with a learner. And this was created for participants to use in rehearsals. The feedback stage was where the trainers would watch the staff rehearsing and provide supportive feedback and additional in situ modelling. So the video model was shown before they rehearsed, but we could also do additional in situ modelling where necessary when the staff were rehearsing. And there was a real emphasis on this stage of it being supportive and that it should feel like you're your own personal cheerleader nearly. And the trainers practiced this. So we really, like the first week, I remember we were all quite nervous about it. Everybody in the room was nervous, but we really got into the flow of it. And by the last week, it was a really fun, or even like middle, the third one maybe, it was a really fun environment and everyone was laughing and lots of like crack in the room. You know, it was very much a cheerleading situation rather than a strict feedback type scenario. Okay, so just back to the instruction stage, actually, I wanted to say that there was a baseline collected from the participants directly after they listened to the PowerPoint presentation. So what happened there, and this would only ever need to take place in a research context, we had the PowerPoint instruction, the resources for each skill were handed to the staff, and we asked them to perform the skill based on what they'd heard in the PowerPoint, because that's typically what we're expected to do when we attend CPD professional learning. We go somewhere, we listen to it, and then we're supposed to go back and be able to do it. So that was how our baseline was collected. These mastery assessments, I want to get into a bit more detail about those. So these were bespoke task analyses that, like documents, created to accompany each skill. So in that, the complex skills are broken into smaller teachable units, and they were designed to match the video models exactly, and they were used to measure progress from baseline. So this sample shows the goal for negotiation communication. So that was one of our goals. We were working on students being able to negotiate for more time. And it shows each step that exactly followed what was in the videos that the staff had to perform in order to be competent. And you'll see that there's a baseline measurement and then rehearsal 2, 3, 4, however many it took. The next one I just wanted to show you, because there was 9 units in the curriculum. Some of them were like this, where they had just complete run-throughs of skills, but some of them required a little bit of a different think. So some units introduced participants to the skill and a teaching sequence to use when applying it in the classroom. So basically phases within it. There was an emphasis throughout the workshops on gradual exposure, especially for the tolerance teaching pieces. So if you can take this example, this is a tolerance of uncertainty, really common one that we would see in classrooms where students might have behaviours of concern or distressed behaviours in the presence of items not being available that they request or that they perceive should be available at a certain time. So we want to give children the chance to learn these concepts, but in low stakes scenarios. So what we did was we designed phases in this teaching. So assemble a first then schedule, which communicates a transition to complete a task, okay? But do this with your student in a neutral location. So you might have a first then schedule and you'd say, okay, it's nearly lunchtime, will we go get the cutlery? You'd get as far as the kitchen and you'd say, oh, actually, that's really busy, that's not available. But that, pardon me, isn't a really motivating time for the child. It's nearly like a chore. So these are the times that we need to introduce children to concepts when there are challenges for them typically within it. So I would suggest that then they would do that multiple times in multiple contexts with multiple staff. And then when you see that there's an understanding around the visual supports and the concepts, that's when you'd move it into the second phase, which is where you might introduce that not available during something that they really want. So you get to the trampoline, there's a queue of 3 people, you know that they're not going to tolerate that long wait. So you say, oh, trampoline's not available right now, let's go to your second preference, and you offer them something different. So I just wanted to explain that with the curriculum, some of them were complete run-throughs, but others were like this, where the staff had to learn nearly like a teaching plan instead of just a complete run-through of the skill. So exposing students to the concepts without challenges, and these are really important in communication supports too. I just wanted to mention that. Right, so I'm going to give you a look at how this looked for 1 unit, showing you the PowerPoint, which was the instruction, a video model, kind of what the rehearsal looked like, and the feedback, which I hope will work now. They're all hyperlinked, so let me know if you can see them. Has a new PowerPoint opened up, Alan?
It has, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So it's got a bit meta here, but I'm going to show you a PowerPoint and a PowerPoint, but I'll really quickly, don't have to show a lot of it. So they all follow the same format, around 12 to 14 slides. We talked about what the goal was based on, and I gave a reference of where it would come from, the objectives. We talked about a behavior of concern that it would help with. So this was negotiating for more time. So protesting when distressed, protesting when preferred activities end, a common one. Why it might be happening. So communication challenges, lack of autonomy, deep interests, all those reasons why it might be difficult for our kids to terminate activities. And then the solutions, empowering our students, teaching them how to negotiate, honoring their requests and being consistent. We had a top tip for every one of them. For this one, it was use initially when moving from one motivating activity to another. So don't introduce negotiation for more time when the stakes are high, like it's going back to the class. Do it when it's going from the trampoline to the, I don't know, the hammock, something, two nice things. And then we talked about the materials needed. We watched the video, which I'll show you in a minute, and then we practiced in pairs. So that is exactly what the instruction element looked like. It was super quick. Sorry, there was one last slide that we did after everything, which you'll see why later. I really had a huge emphasis at the end of how teachers could implement each of the goals into their planning documents and how they aligned with the national school curriculum. So that was done for each of the behaviour support curriculum units as well. I'm going to just close that and hope am I back in my original now, guys?
You're back in demonstration of BST
yeah.
syllabus.
Cheers, thank you, I really appreciate the prompts. So after the instruction, then the staff watched the video model. So that is going to be shown to you now. Can you see it?
It's not up yet.
Oh, sorry, 1 second.
True, or would you like more time?
Can you see it now?
Exactly, yeah, perfect.
I'm going to just go back to the start.
Perfect.
Okay, Jada, that's your timer. It's time for the classroom, or would you like more time? More time. No problem, Jada. We can have another minute. I really think you talk. Jason, there's your timer again. Would you like more time? Great job. More time. No problem. Oh, there's our timer again, Jaden. Would you like more time? More time, no problem. So this is our last one, Jaden, okay? Okay, Jaden, there's our timer. So it's time to go back to the classroom. Nope, we're going to the classroom. Good, man.
Great. So that's a video. So like I said, every one of the curriculum units had that instruction, that PowerPoint, followed by a video, and then the staff would rehearse with the materials that were reflective of the goal we were working on. And during that rehearsal, they were receiving feedback from the trainer. And for every 4 staff that were rehearsing, there was 1 trainer observing. Okay, so the measurement. Skill attainment during the research was measured using accuracy according to those task analyses or mastery assessments. The baseline was collected directly after the instruction for the PowerPoint. Participants then watched a video, and when they had 2 rehearsals with 90% accuracy or higher, or 1 rehearsal of 100% accuracy, they had mastered that and they didn't have to keep going. Trainers collected data during the baseline and rehearsals, and we also had a 5th person in the room who was collecting IOA data. So they were collecting the same data that the trainers were and making sure that it married. We got that for 27% of the rehearsals, and there was 91% agreement. Okay, I'm just going to show you one graph. There are 9 of these, but for brevity, we're not going to go through all of them, and it's kind of the same story in all of them anyway. So the graphs show the acceleration of learning. The mean baseline for this unit, the more time one, was 26% for the group. And that red line demonstrates the criteria aim, so the 90%. So what we see is that most of the participants got it on the third rehearsal. One took until the fourth rehearsal. Some got it on the second rehearsal. So overall, it took them 2.9 rehearsals to master the skill for this particular skill. And the results of the intervention overview, all participants mastered each of the 9 skills. There was similar level learning patterns, observed across all skills. And the overall group average of rehearsals needed was 2.7. So it wasn't an arduous task for anybody. Everybody got it within 2 to 3, maybe 3 to 4 rehearsals, depending on the kind of length of the skill that we were teaching. Really interesting finding. There was no discernible difference between the rate of acquisition between SNAs and teachers. So this often might be where this kind of research might end. Proof that we can teach skills, that's great, but it absolutely guarantees nothing. Doesn't guarantee that anyone will use it. So we wanted to know more. Did they like it? Did they use it? If yes or no, why? So right at the end of the 6 workshops, we carried out an anonymous acceptability survey. It was based on this Parson, Rollison and Reed, which is an evidence-based staff training research. I used their questions and I added 2 more, which I'll show you now. 100% would recommend it to colleagues in similar contexts. Most found it very enjoyable. There was a strong majority that said the content was extremely suitable. So the 7th point on the Likert scale, a strong majority really found the content suitable. And a majority said that the training in terms of time and effort was extremely practical. We added 2 more questions. The final 2 were connected and had closed-end formats again. So question 5 inquired whether participants had recently attended training. This was a new school, so a lot of new schools are offered NCSE training. 6 of the 17 participants, so I'm guessing the 5 teachers and 1 more, confirmed that they had. And the following up question asked them if was the training that I provided more aligned with the needs of their students, and 5 or 83% yes, and 1 said no. So those are interesting findings as well. Okay, the implementation phase. 8 weeks after the workshops ended, we went back to the school and we looked at the teacher planning documents in the 4 classrooms. So there were 4 classrooms in the school, and there were actually 5 classrooms in the school, but 1 student didn't consent and was in an individual classroom. So there's just 4 classrooms that I looked at the planning documents for. So we looked at their fortnightly plans and behaviour support plans where they existed. And what I did here was I frequency counted the implementation. And the reason for that was really to identify the high and low implementing classrooms, because I was very interested in what the barriers and facilitators were to implementation. So when we identified the high implementing class and the low implementing class, these were the individuals that were invited for interview. Sorry, wrong way. Sorry, just one more slide that I wanted to show you as well, because I focused in on it there earlier, is this was given out to everybody at the end of the training. What we did was we looked at as many ways as possible of making this easy for staff to implement if they wish to do so. So this was kind of like a cheat sheet where each of the strands of the curriculum had who they might use it for, how they could put it in, and then a planning reference, how they could align it with the curriculum. The primary language curriculum actually was perfect for aligning with these behaviour support goals with. And so again, that was, I suppose, another encouragement to try and get these things implemented. Right, so implementation by class. Like I say, there were 4 classes, and there was a noticeable variation in the implementation rates of the units across the different classes. They're displayed here as a mean because there were different numbers of students in each class. So the yellow class shows the highest level of engagement. They had 14 instances of implementation and a mean of 3.5 per student. The red class had 12 with a mean of 3. The green class had and lower class had a much lower implementation. The green class had 9, but there was more students there, so it was only a mean of 1.8. And the lowest implementing class was the blue class that only had 3 students and just a mean of 1. In 1 unit was put in per student there. I looked also at implementation by curriculum unit, which was just interesting to look at. And not what I would have perceived would have happened. Actually, I thought the FCT would be the most highest implemented because a lot of these children were non-speaking and didn't have functioning communication systems. But it turned out that the tolerance goals went in at a higher rate. So And then the FCT goals were the lowest implemented. And then no, the assertiveness one was only put in once for one child, which was interesting. Okay, so the last part of my study was the qualitative methods piece, the semi-structured interviews. And I included this slide because maybe some behaviour analysts in the audience might think they've come to the wrong talk. And at the start of my EdD journey, I would never have imagined myself conducting interviews and analysing qualitative data in my theses. But then I'm just so glad that my mind was changed in DCU, and I learned so much about the depth of understanding that qualitative data can bring to an applied study like mine. Okay, so the rationale for including it were firstly to answer two of my research questions. Did the staff consider it acceptable, and what factors influenced implementation of the curriculum in the classroom? The next big reason was social validity. Like, we behaviour analysts, we talk a lot about social validity, I think, when it comes to service users or children, and the neurodiversity movement has rightly held us to account on this. But I think we need to remember that the people on the front line, we really need to remember them when we're thinking about social validity as well. So they're the people that have to do the hard work after we've left our recommendations, and it needs to work for them too. So that was really why I wanted to delve deep into interviews. And again, the other reason, there was no known qualitative feedback gathered in interviews on BST previously. And there's always nuanced reasons about why training impacts or doesn't. And that's why I really wanted to include interviews in this design. So a little bit about the interviews. They were conducted individually, but with whole class teams. So I met the low implementing class team and the high implementing class team, but individually. So teachers and SNAs. They happened on site during school. They ranged in time from 28 to 57 minutes. And the key areas explored were BST as an experience, the implementation in the classroom, and what the barriers and facilitators of that implementation were. I am conscious of time, so I won't get into this too much, but I used reflexive thematic analysis, which is an iterative process. It's really comprehensive and reflective engagement with the data, looking for the complexities and subtleties in the participants' experiences and perspectives. I did find my behaviour analytical skills were useful here, which might be interesting to some of you behaviour analysts in the audience, definitely for identifying patterns and looking at the significance of language and definitely the significance of language in maybe less occurring data sets as well. However, it took me a couple of months to finish this stage of my research because I was learning new skills. It was definitely the hardest part of it. And I'll be really grateful to everyone that helped me, including one of my best friends who was just completed a qualitative master's, who was really helpful. Without her, I don't think I would have been able to finish it, actually. So I'm going to show you a quick look at my thematic map and then come back to it because I need to give you some more background before I really delve into it. So this was what the outcome of that reflexive thematic analysis was. I had three themes with some sub-themes and direct links between them. So the BST experience, I suppose, the true learning of that really came through, and what people felt about why it was a true learning experience was because of the content, the whole school involvement, and that rehearsal piece. However, that rehearsal piece also did cause performance anxiety, which we need to talk about. Leadership was both a facilitator and a barrier to implementation. And then follow-up support was one of the main reasons or critical barriers that people talked about when they weren't able to implement it. So starting with that first theme, the BST experience, the practical dimension was a recurring theme in every interview I did. That active involvement led to meaningful learning. Experiencing. So this quote really stood out for me. I mean, it's the same as anything or in any training I've been involved in before. You can give all the theory in the world, you just sit back there and you're passive. You can even demonstrate to somebody and that's fine. But it's until you get involvement with people, it's that extra dimension, it's that involvement that true learning takes place. So that's where that true learning quote came from. And then another teacher who said rehearsing it with your partner was just brilliant. Like, it was fun, but really beneficial as well. Participants were keen to draw comparisons to other professional learning they'd attended where it was solely instruction based. So I did that with Middleton as well, but again, it was more of them expressing what is important as opposed to the training that you did, which was like role play and that kind of stuff. It was more, these are ideas, this is what our kids are feeling, discussion based. It wouldn't be like yours now where it was a structured program. It was more just like PowerPoint and then chatting. again, like I mentioned there, the side effect, even though it was such a positive, that rehearsal for everybody, the side effect from that was performance anxiety. So the rehearsal component was unanimously cited as the most effective for learning skills, but some participants told me that it caused trepidation and anxiety. So this SNA said, oh, so without a doubt, it was the practical for me, the most effective component. But the flip side of that is some people find that quite threatening. So same for a lot of training, like CPR and all those things, you know, when you're under scrutiny, when it's all theory, we all sit back writing notes. But if you have to get up in front of an audience, you know, many people's greatest fear is presentations and presenting yourself. I know how they feel right now. Again, the performance anxiety, I just wanted to kind of link in here that it was linked mainly to that baseline performance piece. So this will give you an example. The only thing I think was at the beginning when I suppose I didn't know what I was doing. So when it was just put in front of us and we were expected to do it, I was kind of, oh my gosh, I'm like, I was only in a couple of weeks. So I was kind of, oh God, this was the only part, a little bit daunting. But then once you did it once, it was fine. And another one said, I know a lot of people in the school talked about being really anxious about having to do that, but then it was just so chill. So it definitely, this performance anxiety was mentioned, but it definitely aligned more with that baseline performance where they hadn't observed the video model or had the feedback or any support. They just listened to the PowerPoint and they were nervous about having to do it under those conditions. And I would like to say that I have since done this training with another school, and I didn't have to do the baseline piece because obviously it wasn't research and there was no feedback like that. So hopefully it was based only on the feedback, or sorry, on the baseline. But I was thinking maybe one thing I could do in the future if I was doing this elsewhere is maybe send a video to the schools of people rehearsing so they could see how kind of low stakes it is and fun and supportive. That would be one way maybe to help people visualize what it might look like. Okay. Another theme that came up was the relevant content. The curriculum and its relevance to the school's population was highlighted. Teachers who'd attended other seminar-based training commented on how the content wasn't always relevant to the students and the kind of needs of their students. So, because sometimes, like I said, when we went to the NCSE seminar, a 4-day seminar, it was very aimed at like students in a mainstream, you know. That was a teacher. Another teacher said, and I think everyone would agree that each section was so relevant to the student profile. Whole school involvement. So this was a big, obviously, part for me because I really wanted to include SNAs in this. I couldn't do my job or run our school the way we do without the amazing support of our SNAs and everything that they do to help our kids. So it really was important to include them. SNAs felt valued by being included. Teachers felt the load of being the messenger was lifted. So teachers said things like, we were all in it, teachers, SNAs. I didn't need to go back and be like, okay, this is what we do. And like 15 minutes in the morning, start with this, start it in this way, you know. I just said, we're doing this from the training and everyone knew what to do. Another teacher said, and really the fact that it was, you know, it was the whole school, I think it was hugely beneficial because I mean, you know, as a teacher, you're trying to implement all these things, but if there's a kind of a school-wide appreciation of strategies, then it helps. We're all on the same page. A next big theme, leadership. And this is specifically classroom leadership. So classroom leadership was definitely came out as both a facilitator and a barrier to implementation. In the high implementing room, the staff mentioned their class teachers' approach and skills as key reasons why they were able to activate their learning. So an SNA in the yellow class, the high implementing room, I definitely think in the whole room, like we used it, especially because the class teacher gave us, you know, the guidance, I think, around it all, what way we were going to approach it. So we definitely were all on the same page. Leadership, again, oh, sorry. This teacher's interpersonal skills and personality traits were acknowledged as key that aided staff in effectively implementing the curriculum. So things like, and if you have people skills and personality and that to bring other people on board, you're working in that type of safe environment, even when you're doing things wrong, you know they'll discreetly say, well, maybe just try it this way. And a couple of times before we'd start our day, we might just run through it and the class teacher will run through it quickly, how we're going to deliver it, how we're going to show it to the students and stuff like that. And I did want to kind of highlight here that the biographical information of this class teacher is quite interesting. They had worked as an SNA for 7 years in special school settings prior to training as a teacher. So they had an interesting career before becoming a teacher. So the support staff in the blue class both mentioned class leadership as a barrier to implementing the curriculum in practice. So they said our teacher was still finding her feet. She was only new herself, so it was a bit chaotic in the room. And obviously with children with autism, that doesn't work. They need structure, they need routine. And again, the biographical information for this teacher is that they were newly qualified and that they had not worked they had no previous special school experience. And an SNA with considerable experience was frustrated that it wasn't used more in their class. They said, can I just say as well, the 9 things here in front of me, and he was indicating to the behaviour support curriculum, they're foundations. So I found it difficult that it wasn't the sole focus of a new school with new students and teachers and SNAs, that we can't just focus on these for the rest of the year and really hone in on them, you know? Like we were all crying out for a curriculum, crying out for structure. We were crying out for something to focus on. And, you know, it could have been achieved if all these things were the basis of, or the focus for the rest of the year. It was a disappointment that they weren't followed up. Both the teacher and the SNAs in the blue class identified the absence of follow-up support as a critical barrier to implementation. They identified the need for follow-up from both school management and clinical or therapeutic personnel. So the teacher said, you're getting all this information. You need to kind of like, it's like anything, you need to debrief and say, okay, what do we do with this? The teacher said that they would have had confidence to implement it more, provided they had been given more support on identifying the students to match the strategies too. So they said, so once we had that instruction, I feel like we could have run it, but it was just picking which students are the right candidates to run these things. You're getting, oh yeah, I've had that one already. Okay. Now, it's interesting that the follow-up piece was interpreted differently by the SNAs than it was to the teachers. So the teacher wanted to follow up in a more clinical way, kind of therapeutic support, whereas the SNAs kind of voiced it more as maybe more accountability and motivation for their work. So one said, so to answer your question, why they weren't followed up, I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know. It would have to be a more managerial answer to that, I think. And one said, yeah, setting goals, maybe someone from the outside could possibly come in and set them for us, as opposed to us trying, you know, to maybe reach a little higher than what we set for ourselves. And it doesn't matter if you don't achieve them. It's just, are you going in the right direction? Okay, so a recap on my map. I'm going to check the time. How am I doing here? Yeah, we need to finish up soon. That will just kind of, hopefully with those quotes, this will bring this a little bit more into focus for you. Absolutely, the intervention was found to be a positive experience. There was implementation, but the leadership in the class was a big impact on how that was implemented. And where it was a barrier, the absence of follow-up support was definitely critical to that supportive piece. So if there had been more follow-up support, I think we could have got all of the classes to implement it some more. So my conclusions, BST was an acceptable and effective form of professional learning for imparting and implementing new skills in this setting. SNAs and teachers both acquired the skills and enjoyed it equally. Designing bespoke training for schools supporting these higher need students is necessary, and that came out really strongly. The fact that there had been a lot of time and resources spent on training these staff already, but a lot of them didn't feel that it met the needs of the cohort that they were supporting. The on-site whole school involvement definitely promotes that collaboration feeling within the school and the efficiency of implementation, because there isn't that middleman feeling from teachers. It was very strong that there was a need for follow-up support to increase implementation. However, I do want to highlight that there were healthy levels of implementation in 2 of the 4 classrooms without follow-up. Again, that comes back to experience of the teacher. So where teachers are less experienced, more follow-up will definitely be needed. Some considerations, this approach requires more trainers. You know, there's no 2 ways about it. There was 5 people in the room for the 16, 17 staff. But I do think the pyramidal approach, which has been a proven record, could be used in schools. So you could have someone come in and maybe train 1 or 2 people within the school, and that would create that pyramid approach that could be used in the future. Another consideration is that there was less content covered in more time. Like, it took an hour and a half to cover 2 skills, and the instruction part was only about 15 minutes. So actually, if you were just doing like a didactic lecture, I could have covered it in 30 minutes. But because we had to do the modelling, rehearsal and feedback, that took an hour and a half. So there's definitely more time to cover less. However, there is greater chance of implementation than instruction-based only CPD or professional learning. And a really big consideration is, even if that curriculum didn't look like something you could use in your context, remember that those goals can be tailored and made bespoke to individual schools and classroom needs. Just a final thought. A lot of the kids that I support are often referred to as students with complex needs. I often think that maybe that complexity would be greatly reduced if their unmet needs are accounted for, their basic unmet needs. And this was the overarching aim of this research and the curriculum, to support staff to do these things, embed choice with meaningful preferences into every aspect of their school day, providing functional communication training so that their students' personal communication system is effective when they need it, and enriching student support plans with goals that slowly and supportively teach our students new skills to navigate common stressors in their daily lives. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And I want to say a huge thank you mostly to the Anonymous School, the staff and the management that took the time and trust in me to let me do this research in their setting. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, wow. Wow, Trish. Before we get into a little bit of a chat, I can just draw people's attention to the Q&A again. So if you have a question, you can pop it in the Q&A. And also as well, if you don't feel comfortable asking the whole question, there's polls there, which you'll find just on your bottom right-hand corner, the triangle, square and circle. If you click on that, you can respond to those polls. We'll take a look at those in a minute. Trish, there's loads I want to ask you. I suppose I absolutely love that complex needs, basic needs. And it's, you know, it's a long time ago, a parent said that to me, you know, along the lines of, my son has special needs, but he has ordinary needs as well. And if they're not met, I think it can be overshadowed by, you know, some of the complexity that's going on. There has to be a focus on happy, safe, secure environments, doesn't there?
100%. And I mean, I don't want to simplify it either, Alan. Like, there's often many moving parts to the children that we support, but you know, the basics have to be gotten right. And it's quite stark. Like, many of these children had transitioned out of settings at age 11, 12 without functioning communication systems, the ability to make choices, you know, like those are fundamental human rights. And it is paramount that they are the starting point in every setting where we're supporting students with neurodivergent students or intellectually disabled students, so that they have the foundations to then access the world in all of the other ways that we want them to do.
Yeah. Now we've a question in here from Susan, and Susan's asking, what would you say to someone who felt the inclusion of SNA in your training is outside the remit, as there's a lot of teaching involved?
Yeah, I'd agree that the implementation of the goals are the role of the teacher. Selecting them for their students and implementing in the planning and the introduction of them are absolutely the teacher's role. However, the generalization and maintenance of those goals is going to fall on the support staff, on the SNA staff, because if you think about the skill of having to wait for things or things not being available, or the functional communication to ask for breaks, all of that's going to be happening throughout the day. And the SNAs in schools are the ones that are often responsible for transitioning students to things like sensory breaks or, you know, yard and all of those places where those skill sets are going to be really important to be useful. So introduction, implementation, yes, 100%, but generalization and maintenance, that's falling to everyone in the school. So we have to train everybody in this.
Yeah. And then I've been in this situation myself. I've done it myself, and I've seen other both professional speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, and other members of the teams I'd work with, where they make recommendations, and then, you know, it sounds like it's really in the implementation support that the focus is with your work, isn't that right?
Well, that came out loud in the qualitative piece, that whilst there was really healthy implementation in 50% of the classrooms, it would have been a lot more effective had there been a follow-up element that was out of the scope of my research, one person on an ED. But look, that's 100%. Things like this can be embedded into our schooling systems, but we have to either have on-site expertise within the teaching staff to carry out that further follow-up within classrooms, or clinical teams in schools that are there to follow up. And it was really interesting, I think, that follow-up was looked upon in two different ways. You know, the teacher looked upon the follow-up maybe as the role of a managerial role to come in and give her that support, or maybe an external clinical person. And the SNAs looked at that follow-up as motivation to do more, goal setting and kind of accountability. Like that was coming out strong for me from them. So it was pretty much a game of two halves, that follow-up. People looked at it in different ways, but it's absolutely paramount, I think, to make things like this work and to bed down in schools.
Yeah. I noticed as well that you mentioned the blood draws. You used the correct name for it, though. Phlebotomy, isn't it?
Yeah, did I pronounce it right?
I don't know. But I remember distinctly being at a presentation by Sinead Lydon, Dr. Sinead Lydon, who's in the School of Medicine, I believe it is the School of Medicine in Galway. And she presented on her behavioural skills training for teaching junior doctors blood draws.
Yeah.
And her results are just extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, that saying, extraordinary results require extraordinary evidence. Well, her results are unbelievable, that she could achieve with junior doctors better outcomes than far more senior doctors were able to achieve.
And talk about social validity there. Anyone who's ever had their tiny child get their blood taken by a junior doctor with their hands over their eyes, you know, like such a brilliant skill for doctors to have as they enter into their profession. Yeah, so it's used a lot in medical training, actually, where those chains of skills are needed.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to see. Will we take a quick look at the poll? We'll finish on time at 1. We've got Helena coming in at 1:45. So if you can see the polls there, our first one, have you ever attended a CPD session where behavioural skills training was used, i.e. if you watched model performance of skill and where you rehearsed the skill into your mouth? About 50-50 there.
Okay, yeah.
17, the majority had said yes, which is great. More than I would have expected there anyway, I think. Would performing in front of your colleagues in this way make you feel uncomfortable? Good, 2022.
And that would follow, I think, that what I found, that it was like a healthy number of people who weren't hot on the idea at all, you know. And so we have to take that into account, which is why I wanted to interview people about it, because it's not for everyone. And like, you can't force people into situations either that they're not going to be happy in. Or I think there's more I could have done, actually. And one thing I would like to do, I might do it in my own work, is film a session like this. And if I was doing this again in another setting, I might send a little clip along with the consent forms, just to say, this is how it looks, you know, in case people think it's like you're standing there with a clipboard going, wrong, right.
Yeah, absolutely. To give a more informed consent to what they're consenting to might support that. That's interesting. And then the last one we had then, if you work in a school, would you like to attend school-based training? And yes.
Yay, that's great.
You know, it is so valuable, and you know, it's great to see this practical implementation, because I find myself just give recommendations and then move on, and then where is the implementation there? It's a real gap in it. Yeah. So up next, we have Helena at 1:45. So go and take a well-deserved break, and we'll see you all later. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay.